We're standing on the shore, the seashore, watching the waves in the distance coming in and crashing on the sandy beach. We see which wave in the distance we can spot as it arises, and we follow it all the way in until it dissipates in froth and bubbles on the shore. Only there's nothing physical travelling in from the distance to the shore. If you experiment on a pond and put a cork and make a wave, you'll see the cork bobs up and down. This is what the water's doing. The water molecules are just bobbing up and down. When lots of them do this, you get the wave. That wave doesn't go anywhere. The molecules are just doing that, then they stop, and then a little bit further along, the water molecules make a similar pattern. But the water molecules aren't really going very far, they're just bobbing up and down. But we see this entity, the wave, travelling from the distance to the shore. But it's not a real thing, it's a pattern. It's not real in the sense that it's not physical. There's nothing physical moving from the distance to the shore. There's only a pattern that's moving. This is what our attention does as well. Our attention has its own pattern. It moves from one thing to another. It identifies with each thing that it moves to and believes it's that thing. When we're sitting in meditation, we don't even need to be sitting in meditation, we're maybe just trying to focus on something. We might even just be reading a book, and then suddenly our mind's somewhere else altogether. We might be thinking about an incident that happened years ago, or we might be thinking about something that's not yet happened, or we might be thinking about something that somebody told us, but our mind is far away from the words on the page. How did it get there? Are we aware of how it got from one point to the other? This relates here to the story of Rudra. Recollecting where the mind has gone, how it got to what it's thinking about right now, how it got to what it's identifying with right now. This is sometimes called the practice of insight. It's got its value in that it helps us not lose the plot in the future. It helps us to understand the tendencies which take the attention away from itself. So we have the story of Rudra. Rudra here is identified with the absolute consciousness, beginning with identifying with being a mendicant, who then thinks about being born as a tribal person, and then becomes a brahmana and a king, a nymph, a deer, and even a creeper, and so on, ending up as a swan, before coming back to realizing its nature as Rudra once again. And what Rudra does is goes back to all these different beings that it identified with, and they all seem to be meeting each other. He informs each being of its true nature, and then they carry on with whatever they were doing. So this way the whole sequence is understood. The sequence that took us from our attention here to our attention caught up with whatever it was caught up with, to whatever it was believing in. Vasishta continued. Thus having resolved, Rudra went to where the body of the mendicant lay. He awakened it and inspired it to remember all that had taken place. The mendicant saw Rudra as his own self, and also recollected all that had happened. Then both of them went to where Jivata lived in the same infinite consciousness, who revived his body. The three were indeed one. These three, who were wonderstruck at this mystery, then proceeded to the place of the Brahmana, who was asleep embraced by his wife. They awakened his consciousness. Then they went to where the king was asleep in his royal bedchamber. So what we've got here is realizing that all the waves are actually the same, and they're all aspects of the one ocean. They roamed the world of the 100 Rudras of the past. They realized that it was all one infinite consciousness in which all these diverse illusory events had apparently taken place. The one form had become many, as it were. These 100 Rudras pervaded the entire universe and were omnipresent. Perhaps these 100 Rudras were other incarnations, Jivata being one Rudra, the swan being another, and so on. So it's like realizing that the travelling waves are actually all made up of the same thing. They're the same water repeating slightly different patterns at different stages. And they're all aspects of the ocean. And our attention, whatever it identifies with, is being set in motion by psychological tendencies. But it's the same attention all the time. It's the same attention. The one form had become many, as it were. These 100 Rudras pervaded the entire universe and were omnipresent. On account of the fact that the Jiva is surrounded on all sides by the world that arises from it, the unawakened Jivas do not see one another, do not understand one another. It's like thinking that all the waves are different. Just as all waves are of the same substance and are therefore one, the awakened Jivas realize their oneness and thus understand one another. Each Jiva has its own illusory world appearance. However, even as one finds empty space wherever one digs the ground, when this world appearance of the Jivas is inquired into, it invariably leads to the same infinite consciousness. When you start looking into yourself, when you start inquiring, who am I? You find awareness which is independent of your own personality, your own identity. That awareness is non-different. It's not your awareness. It's awareness which is expressing itself in particular localized circumstances. But it's awareness, it's the same awareness which is looking at my eyes as is looking at your eyes. Differentiated consciousness is bondage. Liberation is its absence. Whatever pleases you, affirm that and be firm in that. Think in terms of the attention again. We only have one attention. The attention can identify with lots of things in a row, in a sequence, but it's the one attention. Once we realize the nature of the attention, realize it directly, then this is liberation. And once we realize the nature of the attention, we do not have to keep it on itself. That's where it will come to naturally rest. When we consciously allow it to identify with whatever it's identifying with, then that's still liberation. It's when the attention is hijacked, we're on automatic. We're like a monkey following this and then following that. That's bondage. Who will bemoan the loss of what exists only in ignorance? That which is gained by being still, that exists already, and has therefore already been gained. This is an important point in contrast with the traditional yogic idea of the yogi sitting there immobile and tranquil. Sitting in a state of tranquil quiescence is not the point of spiritual practice. It's realizing the tranquil nature of your essential attention, and that attention is no longer the tail wagging the dog.